Well, hey everybody, it is Wes McDonald here with my good friend Kenneth Edmonds. How are you, Ken?
I am fine. Today's a good day.
Yeah,
I'm just going to head out on a trip.
that's what I hear. And I was
Yeah.
actually just going to share my screen for a second because we always say, where are you watching from? And for everyone that is tuned in and watching, let us know where you're watching from. But what I want to show is where you will be going. So, can you tell us a little bit about this beauty right here?
Yeah, it is. And I'm going up to your part of the world too.
You are. So taking the Queen Mary 2 up to Canada. And I
Yep.
thought it was really cool that we were talking about the weather, how it can be sometimes up here in Canada, and that is a true ocean faring cruise ship. So it should be good no matter what.
Yep. It is a cruise liner, and the ships are built differently because they have a longer, narrower bow. They're designed to cut through she's designed to transit the North Atlantic. Most of the year, she spends a lot of time going back and forth between New York and Southampton.
Wow. Well, I love the colors and the lines on it. It reminds me of very much like an old school kind of
Yeah.
cruise ship. I won't mention the one that starts with a T because that would be a bad omen, but
Yeah.
you can
We'll actually go to the museum about that because we'll be in Halifax on Saturday. And so
ah,
that's where all of the survivors came on shore. And so we'll see the museum, may go out and check out the graveyard. There's quite a bit of stuff. So we're looking forward to Halifax. And then we have two of the little towns we're going to visit in the St. Lawrence Seaway, Ile de something and Saguenay.
oh, sure.
And then we'll go into Quebec City. So it'll be a
Well, little known fact, but I'm actually from Halifax. So that's, just outside Halifax, a little town called Grand Lake, Nova Scotia, for anyone that's into geography. But oh, yeah, I just saw a picture of the Maritime Museum of Halifax. So that should be fun. So, anyone out there, let us know where you're watching from. So, this always has an international following. I am joining in from Canada, right across the border from Buffalo in a beautiful little beach town called Crystal Beach. And what about you, Ken? Where are you?
I am in Central Florida, just south of Orlando, a little tiny town called Lake Wales.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be down your way in November and looking forward to that because, as you know, where I live in November is going to be winter.
Yes, it is.
So if you have any comments and questions, please leave them. We'd love to see, what you're thinking. Any questions for Ken in particular today, because that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. This really is your show today, Ken.
Yes, it is my show.
Yeah.
And actually, it's based on part of what I teach in the service management class. This is a small part of what I teach about customer service. And if we could, let's go ahead and have that slide up, because we'll start with this. Because I believe that this is what everybody's philosophy should be in business. And especially when it comes to customer service. We'll talk about why in just a second.
Oh, sorry. Looks like we're both trying to put it up.
Yeah. And this is a quote from a Tina Turner song. And I love the logic behind this. And this is what I tell my service managers, that if they're going to have a service meeting, they ought to start by playing this part of the song. Because you're simply the best, better than all the rest, better than anyone I've ever met. And if your customers think that way about you, guess what? You're going to have customers that are going to stick around. But very, very rarely do we put enough emphasis on creating great customer service. We all think about the people that are notorious for bad customer service, cell phone companies, cable companies, internet providers. Some of those places are absolutely horrible. Hi, Greg. Good to see you today.
Hey, buddy.
And part of what we're going to talk about actually comes from a book that was written by a gentleman named Carl Sewell. And he was the largest and still is one of the largest luxury car dealers in the United States, if not the world. And he has the one of the highest customer satisfaction ratings of anyone that's measured by J.D. Power.
Wow.
But he really focused on the lifetime value of a customer, because he took the business over from his dad, and he sat down and he said, I've got to make this run better than it is. And he said, well, what does a luxury car dealer spend on cars? I mean, a customer spend on cars during their lifetime. And, he approached it from the perspective that this back in the 60s was about $250,000. Now it's around 500,000, I think, in the latest edition of the book.
Wow.
But when somebody comes in to get an oil change, for example, and you treat them like they're a $500,000 customer, you know, you're going to impress them. They're going to want to do more business with you. If you treat them like they're an $18 oil change customer, it's like, why bother coming to you? I can go to Quick Lube.
Hey, I know that experience very well. I mean, it's, yeah, I'm just going to add some color to that for you, because obviously I've done that and I'm guilty as charged, right? What do they say? It's nobody's easier to sell than a seller, right? And
Yeah.
whenever I have that kind of customer service, I always spend more. I do. And I feel good about it. Right. So,
yeah. And you go back and you go back and you go back.
Yeah.
And so in our industry, it's very similar. You know, they're both service-based industry. And it was funny was that, you know, a lot of the things, you know, and my students have to read this book in class. It's one of 5 they have to read. But, you know, they all say, well, it's about, you know, a car dealership. It doesn't apply. But I am convinced that it does apply, because the book uses the let's say the metadata from a car dealership, or, you know, the analogy of a car dealership, but it really applies to customer service in general. And it is, yeah, it's very valuable. I'll put a link in everywhere for where you can find.
Well, and especially in our world, Ken, and where your expertise has been garnered your whole career, like just swap out a car with a copier, right?
Exactly.
They both need service. They both have to be sold or leased or financed, right? So there's so many parallels. They both need parts and maintenance, and
exactly. And they both, you know, can build long-term relationships. You know, if you don't take care of them, they'll go to the next, you know, and they'll become like me. The last time I bought a car, I just sent a spec sheet around to a whole bunch of dealers, and I just kept sending quotes around till I got to, there was only one man left standing, and I bought that one because I didn't have any loyalty to him. I didn't know the dealers, didn't care about him. I just wanted a cheap car.
Well, and you can lose loyalty too. And I'll share one more story, because you're on the automotive tincture, right? So there was a dealership that I bought 4 cars from, right? And I'm a big Jeep fan. So once you're, you know, kind of a Jeep loyalist, and phenomenal service from the owner throughout the years, until one day I had such a bad service experience that I never went back, right? That I was made to feel small. I was made to feel like a liar. I was made to feel a whole bunch of things that didn't really stack up to the experience I've had before. And it was such a bad experience, such a bad service experience. I've never gone back.
Well, you know, I had something very similar to that. I bought a tractor from a dealer that was fairly close to me, and I had them do some maintenance, and they forgot to put an oil plug back in.
Oh.
And, you know, it was for the hydrostatic drive, and they, you know, I noticed it was leaking. It's one of those things, you know, that it's just like the fill plug, not the bottom plug.
Yeah.
And it was leaking in my driveway. So I called them up, told them they had hauled my tractor over there, you know, and pointed out that I spent a lot of money on them. It was about $600 of what I spent to have it serviced and hauled over and everything. And I said, you know, I told them, you know, they needed to solve that problem. And their idea of a solution was they will sell me a gallon of fluid and a plug. We're going to sell it to me. And I had to go pick it up.
Oh, boy.
You know, and that was the best deal. Well, I take it back. I got a little better deal. They offered to give me a used plug and a half a jug, but my wife still had to drive over and pick it up. And I told everybody I knew about it, and I never went back to them.
Yeah.
I would have been a great loyal customer and bragged about them to everybody, but never did. Anyway, so it's the philosophy, and it has to start at the top. You know, I see lots of times where companies talk about their customer service, but when you experience it, it's not great. Sometimes it's not even good. You know, and I'll give you an example. Have you eaten at Chick-fil-A?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I am addicted to their chicken now.
But when you deal with an employee at Chick-fil-A, what is one of the things that is different about them?
Oh, always no questions asked. If there's, and there have been mistakes like with an order or whatever, and they've, you know, it's never your fault. It's, and it's so fast. Like they have so many people there that the actual service experience for a fast food place is unparalleled. Yeah. They're happy. They seem to be a good team. They don't look like sad teenagers, you know, slogging over a hot grill. There's a good energy.
Yeah. And they say please and thank you.
Yes.
And it starts with the owner of the company, because that was a requirement. He said, we hire people that say please and thank you. We don't train them. We hire people that do that, because they wanted to hire people that had that kind of
DNA.
Yeah, exactly. So from in our industry, we need to think about customers as being customers for life. In other words, when the hardest and most expensive customer you ever acquire is a new one. And so we want to build our company in a way and treat our customers in a way that customers want to keep coming back and keep coming back. I worked in a dealership in in El Paso that did that very well. And one of the sales guys, he mostly played golf and took orders from a whole bunch of big factories. They'd call him up when they needed more copiers. It wasn't a question if he was going to get the deal. They just called up and told him what they wanted. But it was because of the way he took care of them and the way the company took care of them.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that that's what we want to do. And it's not just, in the sale piece of it, but it's every transaction. Another rule, and I tell my students that this has got to be probably, I think my first rule is, when you're dealing with a customer, is that you underpromise and overdeliver.
Yeah.
You want to always exceed their expectation, because so many times people will write a check they can't cash. They'll tell you they'll get you something tomorrow and it's 3 days late.
Yeah.
Whereas if you tell them it'll be 3 days and you deliver it tomorrow, you're going to be a hero. And so it's easy to make sure that we make the correct expectation and give ourselves a little breathing room, so that if the manufacturer doesn't ship it today or whatever it is, that we can go in and take care of it. Because when we do that, and some of the other things we think about is just a little extra. I talk about, in dealing with problems, if a customer has a problem, credit back the copies, that they wasted, but give them some paper too. Do something to make up for it. So, and do something that they wouldn't expect to make up for it. Because again, we're leaving them with this really nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. There's an adage that people won't remember what you say, but they will remember how you make them feel. And so it's by building this kind of, and again, I said, it's at every level in our, in a company. We want to make sure that that's what we always do, is give them this something that they don't expect, something more than they expect. Sometimes we can give them something they don't expect, and it's not a positive.
That's true.
And I'll share an example of it. I needed to get an awning put on my trailer when I was living in an RV in California, and we had to move the trailer off the lot you had to come off the lot for 3 days. So I talked to a dealer, said, yeah, he could get it done in 3 days. So I had somebody haul the trailer to his dealership. 3 days later, I have a guy hired to go over there and pick it up and take it back. And I get, it's not ready. We don't have the part yet. And I went in and, in person and in the middle of their showroom, explained to the service manager, without ever raising my voice, that was probably some of the worst customer service I'd ever experienced. But it was because they didn't do what they said they would do. I made my plans based on what I was promised.
Yeah.
And so we just don't want to do that. It doesn't matter if we're talking about delivering equipment, setting up equipment, when a tech's going to be back. And this has to go all the way down to every technician has to believe this. It just has to be a part of the way they do things.
Yeah.
And it's a training issue. It's a philosophical issue, but we want to make sure they understand, always build yourself some slack, so that, because if you tell a customer you're going to do something, I expect you to do it.
Yeah, I think it's just, setting realistic expectations with your customer, right, in the first place. So if they say, hey, is this going to change my life? And it's, give me honest, say, no, you know what? It's not going to change your life. But every day when you come into the office, it's going to change your work world, right? Like this thing is going to do that. And no, it's not going to change your life, but it will change your work experience. And it's even those subtleties, right? And how you explain something to a customer that, that gets them to a place that says, okay, you're honest with me. You're telling me what this can and can't do. And therefore, I think because you're being honest, isn't it easier to exceed expectations when you're honest?
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting. I talk to the service managers about that when they're installing equipment. That's where you set the bar, and you tell them that, for example, if you have a 4-hour response time, I would tell it to them in the way that, our guaranteed response time is, if your equipment is down, we'll be here in 4 hours. Normally we will call you within the 4 hours, even if you're not down. We'll try to make sure that we can get your machine where you're able to keep working, and then we'll get to you as quick as possible. But I immediately take that 4-hour response time off of everything but a down machine. And I tell them that please understand that every machine will have some problems occasionally. You'll have scheduled maintenance. There are things that you can do to help us with it. And as things come up, we'll help educate you. We'll try to make sure that you understand how to use this machine to its best advantage. And so now what I've done is built some expectations that are easily managed by the service team. I don't, the sales team sometimes may go and say, we get 4-hour response time on every call. Well, if I've got a maintenance light on and the machine is fine, that shouldn't be a 4-hour response time. I shouldn't have to pull a tech off of what he's doing somewhere where he's fixing somebody's equipment to go turn a light off. And so I'm a firm believer, again, that goes back, we build this in. Another way of saying it is we under promise and we over deliver. You got to do that.
Yeah.
And then from that, the next thing, and most businesses are not good at this. I don't want to just say to dealers. I don't think most businesses in general are very good about it. A lot of times we'll survey customers, to see, what they thought about something. But there's some questions that we don't ask that are really important. The first question I would always ask is, what could we do better? Or ask them, what if you could improve one thing about how you interact with our, if we could improve one thing about how your interactions with our company is, what would that be? Now you think about the value of knowing that piece of information
and acting on it.
Yes. You have a work list of what to fix.
Have you been watching a show? I'm addicted to it now. My wife watched the whole series already, and now she's got me hooked on it. Ted Lasso, for any Ted Lasso fans out there, you got to watch it. He's an American football coach who's sent over to the UK to basically destroy a team, right? A team that a woman won through a divorce and wants to ruin the team because it's the only thing her husband ever loved. But this coach, Ted Lasso, is unbelievable. But he put one of those old school suggestion boxes in the locker room. And when him and his coach were out for dinner, they opened it up and were going through it. And most of them were wanker, like just insulting him. And then they came upon one that said shower pressure too low, right? And so, of course, nobody thinks of anything. The next scene, they show the lads in there showering after a game, and one of them turns on the water, and the shower pressure is so high, it knocks him on his butt. But they listened, right? They listened, and it's little things, right? Like, a shower, not an extra $10 million a year for your position, but just decent shower pressure. Doesn't have to be big, right?
Exactly. And a lot of times what your customers will find, maybe a little bit annoying about doing business with you are little things that you're not really aware of, that nobody's really thought through the process. Maybe it's the way, and you run into this on websites all the time. I in my other business, I look at things about accessibility. And you'll find all the other stuff at the top of the board, right across the top, you have all these tabs. And in the bottom, somewhere down hidden, there'll be a little blurb about, a little link to click for accessibility. And I'm like, why? Why do you have to read the whole silly website to find that link when, if you want to know about pricing or, all this other stuff, it's right up there at the top.
Yeah.
But accessibility is not, And so again, you think about, what is it that my customers find challenging? Another thing that I'm a firm believer in is there's two other times you need to ask customers, or let me rephrase this, people that are not customers either anymore or didn't become customers. You need to find out why. I think that one of the least used questions, and then maybe the most important, is for an owner, or a president of a company. If a company leaves you and leaves service, maybe they walk away from service or they buy equipment from somebody else, you need to call them up and say, listen, I understand you made a different decision, and please understand, I'm not trying to influence that. I accept your decision. But what I would really love to know is, what did we fall short in? What could we have done better that might have changed things?
Yes.
If you knew that about why every customer ever left, would you have things that you could work on fixing?
Yeah, and I think the first thing you have to do, obviously, is like you said, ask, right? I mean, and I think that oftentimes we don't even do that, right? That to your point, sometimes we send out these surveys and nothing ever gets done. So first ask, second listen, third adapt. In other words, do something.
The other one that's associated with it is when you fail to close a deal that you've been working on. And again, it can't be the salesman. I don't think it should be the salesman. I think it should be the owner. Yeah. Is to call up and say, listen, again, same kind of thing. I know you made a different decision, but it's obvious we fell short some way in this process. And we just want to get better.
Right.
And you think about it. If somebody called you and asked you that question, would you try to help them?
Yeah.
Because there's no threat to it. It's not pressure. It's just, could you do me a favor? And
it's already done. Yeah.
All right. Again, you start to fix those things. It was interesting because I read a book by, it was Carl Levin on guerrilla marketing. And he talked about the banks back in the day, and you still see it with the credit cards today. You have all these great offers to get customers in the door. The problem is they're losing customers out the back door so fast that they're not making any headway. And if you could figure out why you're losing customers, and it's kind of, I say it's like fishing with a net that's open at both ends. If you could close the far end of the net so that when they go in, they're stuck, what happens to your business? It's going to grow. And it's the same thing in our industry. You think about what your churn rate is. And the worse your churn rate is, the more important these things become. We got Greg over here. Let's see what he had to say.
I'll give you another. I'll give you another real life example too, Ken. So my wife and I are in the process of selling our home right now, and we had a prospective buyer which seemed very interested, and then we got a message back from their real estate agent saying no, they're not interested. There's a few things they didn't like, and that was the response back from my real estate agent. So of course I went back and said, well, what were those few things they didn't like? Because maybe other people will come through the house and not like it too, right? And so very simple things. One was the baseboards in this room that I'm in right now weren't as freshly painted as the rest of the house, right? The second thing was a piece of concrete at the back, which had a crack in it. And the third thing was the side gate fence was too squeaky. So what do you think I did?
I bet you painted, oiled the gate, and fixed the concrete.
Yes. All of which took me probably about 3 hours of effort. But the point being that it's that adaption, right? That you have to listen to that input. And honestly, my agent said, don't worry about it. They're just picky. I'm like, no, hold on. I mean, those were valid concerns and I'm going to take care of those things, right? So I think it's just a real world example in my own life, right? So
yeah, a perfect example.
Yeah. And I did make sure that we sent a note back to that real estate agent saying, by the way, those things that they talked about, they've been taken care of. Now, will that lead to them coming back to look at the house? Probably not. No. But it will leave an impression with that real estate agent, I hope, that, these people are good people. Like, it's like they're actually paying attention to, the advice they're given, right? Well, fingers crossed.
Okay. You know what? I would have upped your game just one other notch.
Oh, yeah.
I would have sent them a thank you card for providing the feedback so that you could fix it.
Yes.
Because when you do that, like I said, again, it becomes unexpected. Nobody ever expects you to thank them for criticizing what you've done.
I know.
But when you do, man, it's going to get some impression.
Yeah. And I think it's cathartic because I think it also, and as Greg says here, bad news travels faster than the speed of light. Absolutely. Right. Especially with social media and other platforms, the people have to amplify their negativity. And as we all know, social networks do grow faster through negative input, unfortunately. Right. So yeah. That's a really good share, Greg. And
a good example of that was the American Airlines employee that was throwing the luggage, and somebody got a film of it and shared it, and like millions of people watched that video.
Oh yeah.
And it cost him his job, but it still was terrible for American Airlines. Put a big black eye on him.
Oh no, absolutely. Right. And that kind of does lead into your next point. That's the negative version of it. Let's talk about the positive version of it. Right. So oftentimes we leave kind of these decisions of a good service experience with with very limited people, maybe the service manager, right? That it's their responsibility. You say, however, and I've heard you say this many times, that really it's about empowering your employees. So maybe talk more about that.
Yeah. And there's several things associated with it. The first thing is and I work really hard with my service managers on understanding this, is you want your employees to learn to think about their job like it's their business.
Right.
And you teach them how to make good business decisions, and then you let them make it. So a good example, and you can think about this in your case, how many times have you called somebody, needed some customer service, needed something done? And the end result was, as you got ran through, especially like a cable company or something, you get run through 4 or 5 people, and you have to repeat exactly what you said to every one of those 4 or 5 people, and the last person can't help you. And then you tell them you want a supervisor. Well, there's no one available, and they hang up on you. So to the extent that it's practical within your company, let people make decisions. If somebody calls up with a bad meter reading, rather than passing that on to the billing department, who might have to go into voicemail, just have the receptionist get the information and update it, or then hand carry it over. So the customer's not inconvenienced, isn't sitting there playing phone tag. I tell my service managers, if you need to make the customer happy, give them some paper, give your technicians the authority to do that. Give them the authority to go ahead and credit back something, so that when they need to make a decision, they can do it without having to, let me call my boss. Okay, I talked to my boss. He's got to talk to his boss. And it'll be, 2 or 3 days, whereas the tech can walk out and bring him in 2 reams of paper and, and exceeded that expectation again.
Yeah, I love it. And, we experience that. I know that anytime I've been in a sales role or a sales management role, that I had a certain budget amount I was allowed to spend up to, right? In other words, use your discretion. You can spend up to this amount, before it needs approval, right? And I think that kind of discretion and kind of trust has to happen, like you say, at all levels, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's important. And what will happen is as it starts to make your employees feel important and feel trusted. And when an employee feels like it's his business and those customers are his customers, and he has the authority to do what he needs to take care of them, he's going to take ownership and drive results that you don't expect. It's when they think, well, okay, I'm paid by the hour. I got to go spend 8 hours doing something. I'll go do it. It's when it starts to become, very unproductive.
Yes. And hey, listen, in respect for your time and that of, the folks that tune into the show, thank you very much, by the way. You have another point here about consistency, right? Because we all see this. New Year's, the gym is always fuller than it is, 2 months later, right? So consistency is a problem with a lot of resolutions, right? So talk about this in business and in service.
Well, and I use this analogy. Why do people go to McDonald's to eat when they're on the road? Is it because of best burger?
Never, no.
It's because they know what they'll get.
It's consistently average.
And I use the example of when a technician walks into the office. What happens when any technician walks into the office should be exactly the same for every technician, because then the customer knows what to expect. I am a fan of polo shirts, but I'm a fan of uniform polo shirts, because when you walk in, they know who you are. Yeah. I'm also a fan of ID badges, because when you're out walking around and somebody says, "Why are you here?" I say, "Well, you can take the ID badge and hold it up. I'm with this, and I'm here working on your equipment." And you think about it, if somebody's got an ID card, it just kind of automatically triggers in your mind that it's okay, they're here.
Yes.
It's a guy skulking around, looking at stuff and doesn't have, you don't know who he is or why he's there. You don't recognize his clothes or any of it. You're like, okay, why? Are you supposed to be back here? I think you should, let's go talk to somebody here.
Yeah.
And the other piece of it is that consistent processes, and I'm a huge fan of processes and procedures, because it's building these in every level that we can start to we can replicate our success. Sure. And we can find the things that don't work, and we can get them out of those things and just constantly improve. And when we do these things, you're going to have customer service that's unparalleled. You'll be able to beat every one of your competitors in town's customer service, because there's not very many of them that do a good job. In fact, when I got started in this industry, the reason I became a copier dealer is because every customer I was selling toner cartridges to hated their copier dealer.
Right.
They absolutely, literally hated them. And because it was the way they got treated. There was no customer service.
Well, and listen, I want to make sure that folks know how to get in touch with you, right? So obviously on LinkedIn.com, just look up Kenneth Edmonds. You'll be able to find him there. He's very active on LinkedIn, a great place to reach out to him. And of course, visiting the website, we can learn all about his services, right?
Mhm.
Coaching, I know that you are a seasoned coach over the years. Service management training, the number of courses I've seen you deliver over the years is astounding. The amount of people that you have helped through that service management training, and technical training if folks are looking to actually sharpen the saw for more specific things, right?
Yep, all of those things.
Yeah. And for all those watching out there, I think as you've showed today, Ken, that it doesn't necessarily have just to do with service managers, right? That good service, like you said, if you empower your employees at all levels, can make a
Exactly.
huge difference in a business's success.
Absolutely. It can transform a company. It can transform your profitability.
Wonderful. Hey, well, I really appreciate having you on. It's as a guest this week, which is fun.
Yeah.
And as I like to say, and as you always deliver on, until next time, keep learning and
Keep leveling up.
see you next time.